I'm gonna do the December wrap up. I have been sick, so I haven't been putting out videos, but I'm finally feeling somewhat well enough to get through me talking about books. Might be a little winded at the end of this, and I'm excited to share what I thought about them. I'm excited to hear if you guys have read any of these books. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened. So I was vibing with Christmas so much. I went to a Christmas bar, and I think that's where I got COVID from, and it just caught me like by surprise. I think it was just like that wave. I just caught the wave, rode it, everything. The timing was perfect, unfortunately. Yeah, the bar was really cute. I had a lot of fun. I was part of the Christmas COVID crew and set for this month's reads. So I think my top was A Little Princess. I think I am biased on A Little Princess. I actually own the movie, so I love watching it. I remember just watching it growing up and learning so many life lessons from it. The book has even more life lessons. It's really cool. I definitely recommend that as a read. I just think it's a cool book to just remind you that we're all princesses. Just a lot of lessons that I've kept with me along the way of just being humble and genuine. I think more geared towards women and young girls and ladies and little ladies. And I just found out that Alfonso Cuaron is the director. One of my favorite Mexican directors actually directed the movie, which I thought was really cool because it's like full circle, but it makes me really excited because I really like him. He did Pan's Labyrinth, which is a really interesting story too. He did Gravity with Sandra Bullock, and I'm pretty sure that one he's won several awards. He's known for long takes, so like once you hit action, like there's no stopping, and that's a really skillful one for the actors too, just like to hit every scene in just one long take. It's really impressive. He did Roma, that was his, I think his most recent one, just for all my movie buffs. So my second favorite pick for December reads is The Snow Child by Eowyn and Ivey. It kept me interested. There were so many, I felt like I was watching a movie. There were so many parts where I was just waiting to see what would happen, and I was kind of cringing and hoping nothing bad would happen. And it was overall a tasteful adventure with ups and lows, and just felt like a roller coaster ride. But I mean, it's set in Alaska. We're following a older couple, and they haven't had any children, so they're kind of, you know, trying to rekindle the fire and trying to figure out if Alaska is for them. I really liked it, and I love how they talk about nature, and it's somewhat mystical, has a bit of like a hint of magic, which I liked. And then there's so many spots that just made the snow sound so pretty. I wish I had a weekly vlog for this book because I just had so many comments to say, and it was just such a good book. There is one little section where he's hunting. You kind of get like Avatar vibes, where they talk about him being grateful for the food that he's receiving by being able to hunt this animal. And I thought that was beautiful, and the way they just like described it is so beautiful. So I'm gonna read this little piece that I thought was really pretty, and the whole description was like you have to read it to fully grasp it. As Jack knelt in the bloody snow, he wondered if that was how a man held up his end of the bargain, by learning and taking into his heart the strange wilderness, guarded and naked, violent and meek, tremulous in its greatness. So I think the juxtaposition of those words that they use, like guarded and naked, and then violent and meek. I love that. And I feel like the wilderness that's kind of how it is. It could be very brute, but it can also be very beautiful. And there's another little section, let me see, where like they've been struggling through the season. It just feels like they can't catch a break, but then they have really beautiful moments. And I liked this little part because it's kind of how real life is. You kind of just have to surrender. I think that's kind of how life is. You kind of have to surrender at times and know when you can't force things and you don't really know what's going to happen. But let me read this part to you. "Dear sweet Mabel," she said, "we never know what is going to happen, do we? Life is always throwing us this way and that. That's where the adventure is. Not knowing where you'll end up or how you'll fare, it's all a mystery, and when we say any different, we're just lying to ourselves. Tell me, when have you felt the most alive?" So that's like one of her neighbors that lives in Alaska as well. Mabel is the main character. And that's her neighbor kind of like chatting to her after like a rough season. And I thought that was really cute because sometimes it feels like that, especially right now with COVID. It really feels like that, where it's like we don't really have control of things. We kind of just have to hope for the best. I mean, there are things we can, make decisions about and kind of control. And it's like we kind of just have to flow. I would definitely recommend it. I think I finished this one in like 2 days. Again, I did read all day, but it was really good read. And A Christmas Carol. Honestly, I had watched the movie before, but after reading the book, it just felt so much more intimate. Now, as an adult, I can see more of the life lessons of like money and being unhappy and working your butt off and not resting and being grumpy and imposing that energy on others. Christmas is a time to just enjoy everybody in the moment and be joyous and kind of emit that energy. A Christmas Carol is a nice reminder of that. I think Charles Dickens did a good job of portraying how they used to have ghost stories during Christmas time. I know we're used to like summer ghost stories by the campfire. What I read according to this book and the Valancourt Victorian ghost stories is that was what people did back in the day. It was like Christmas, it got darker earlier and people would just gather around the fire and be warm and tell ghost stories. So I think he definitely put a hint of that with the ghosts from past, ghosts from present, ghosts from future. Did watch 2 of the versions of the movies. I think one of them watched the 1920s version of A Christmas Carol, which was good. And then I watched the 1954 version with Alistair Sim. That one was a really good rendition. He did really good going from like grumpy to like really overly happy. It was almost comical, so I definitely recommend to see that one. There are a lot of renditions, so maybe next year we can do like best to worst renditions of A Christmas Carol. There are so many of them. But yeah, if you guys have a favorite rendition of A Christmas Carol movie version, I would love to hear your comments. The way it was written, it was really pretty. It really did get me in the mood for Christmas. And it's just such a like timeless story, and it makes you feel warm and fuzzy. The way he describes meals and dinner and like all the different scenes that the ghosts take him to. His co-workers' family, which they're like the poor family, and how happy they are just to have a dinner. And then they have Tiny Tim. He's just like the epitome of like pureness. Tiny Tim's line is like the epic one, which is funny because he's a little kid and that's the line that kind of rings through the whole story. Okay, so check out this part. I really like how this is written. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had, by one consent, caught fire, and were blazing away to their dear hearts' content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet was there an air of cheerfulness abroad that the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. I mean, what? Who writes like that? That's beautiful. Yeah. I think that's why it's a classic. And then the ghosts and the food descriptions, it's really good. And then just Ebenezer, it's like the ultimate grump, and then just he's so open-minded to the ghosts. Like, that's the only thing that catches his attention, and he's just like, all right, take me to the next, like, I'm ready, I'm learning, so let's do this. And just so much more satisfying, because he could have just been like, no, you know, stuck to his ways, been a grumpy rich guy that just never learned his lesson. And I think that's probably the ultimate like win, is that he opened his mind to changing. And I think that was the part that caught my attention the most out of the story, where he was like actually reacting to the lessons that the ghosts were teaching him. Kind of cool to learn a little bit of history about. I think this book does a good job of, well, this one is Introduction by Margaret Atwood. It's a Everyman's Library version. Kind of give you a little bit of history, a timeline of what Dickens went through as a writer. He did have financial issues trying to like come up, you know, as an author. And sadly, this story made a lot of money. There was some plagiarism issues. Another person published kind of like a summary or like a condensed version and kind of like took all his money basically. So it was pretty hectic time with A Christmas Carol, but that kind of was the catalyst for Dickens to continue writing. And he did keep writing, and then he ended up making his money back from it. That's A Christmas Carol. Might make it like a Christmas tradition to just read it, because it definitely gets you into the Christmas spirit. These two books really, in my opinion, were kind of hand in hand. I don't know. This one, it's an easy read. He writes beautifully, but it just gave me like this little bite. Definitely like on the edge of my seat while I was reading this, because I was wondering where it was going. You follow this one guy, Shimamura, and he basically is married. He has a lot of money. He kind of goes into the mountains to take a break, and the mountains of Japan have like skiing resorts as well. So it describing the snow, it also gets you kind of like into the mood of snow and winter, and the way he describes the snow is beautiful as well. Okay, so there's this part. Slender autumn grasses grew along the top of an earthen wall. The pale yellow plumes were at their most graceful, and below each plume narrow leaves spread out in a delicate fountain. So it's very pretty writing. I kind of was waiting to see where it was going, because he just starts describing these two women, and he describes them really pretty. Like, he admires them, you can see the admiration. But then there's like, that's as far as it goes. Very superficial relationship that he has with the geisha, and I got the vibe like the ski resort geisha were not as prestigious as regular geisha. A lot of dialogue that's a bit frustrating, and then it just kind of bites a little bit, because he is kind of dealing with these geisha on his time off, and then like time goes by and he comes back and has this like transactional relationship with these girls, but you can see that they care about each other. So it's really interesting, but then there's like kind of that taboo part of it because the geisha are more like not geisha, and it is a fast read. It flows. You can tell it's translated from Japanese, so sometimes you do kind of have to read and to fully grasp the image that he's painting for you. But it's beautiful. This one's interesting. He has a lot of play with symbolism and colors. There's like there's juxtaposition also of like the colors of the white snow and then dark hair and dark colors, and he like compares those colors and contrasts them in his writing. So it's very lyrical. It's really poetic and really pretty. Just the plot, personally, I think it kind of take me out of the cheerfulness of Christmas, and I think it is more of like a unrequited love story. I'm definitely glad I read this book, but it might be a little while before I read this again. The Valancourt Book of Victorian Ghost Stories. So this one was really interesting. I expected the English to be a lot more simple, but it's Victorian and you can definitely tell. And honestly, to me, the faster I read it, the more I was able to understand it. It flowed more. And then if I didn't understand something quite right, I would go back and read it again. But the ghost stories were cute. Like one of the ghost stories was about this guy, and he's visiting a palace, and he's like high-ranked military, and they make him stay in the haunted room, but they don't tell him it's haunted. And then the next morning at breakfast, he's like gathering his things and he's leaving. And they're like, what happened? And he's just like, well, let me tell you. And that's what's cool about all these stories. It's always like you get the campfire vibe. So the narrating is very storytelling-esque. And apparently these are stories that were actually published in like newspapers back in the day. So it's a cool anthology book that you'd have to read while sipping on some coffee because the read is a little bit more dense, but it's fun. So I would definitely recommend this for my adults that like ghost stories and history. If you know any other cool facts or information, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear how this all kind of like intertwines. I'm glad to share this with you guys, and if I could just entertain you for a little bit and make you feel happy and warm, have this community of people that love books and people that love history and movies and beer. Really appreciate you guys supporting. Please like it, subscribe. I'll put all the book information below. I hope you guys had a Merry Christmas or a Happy Hanukkah. See you guys soon with the January video. Ciao!